The Akamarian governor screamed as a human soldier pressed his armored boot on the alien's head. The soldier pushed the barrel of his blaster into the governor's open mouth, daring the trembling alien to mock the small human detachment again. Lieutenant Commander Keith Tucker watched the standoff with a smirk. His platoon of just 50 hardened Galactic Defense Force soldiers had been assigned to protect the Akamarian colony on Zephyrus Prime, a backwater planet on the fringes of civilized space. But the fragile Akamarians, despite their technological prowess, had arrogantly dismissed the need for human muscle. "Why station soldiers here?" Governor Novak had laughed when Tucker's dropship first touched down. "Our robotic defenses can handle any threat. Your primitive kind are not needed." Tucker had bitten his tongue, knowing his veteran troops were worth 1,000 Akamarian drones. Strange energy readings and colonist disappearances had brought them to Zephyrus Prime. Something was very wrong here, no matter how much the governor denied it. Now Novak was choking on his own blood as Sergeant Major Jack Ripper O'Neill crushed the alien's skull beneath his heel. The rest of the human squad had their weapons trained on the shocked Akamarian delegation. No more laughing now. Tucker stepped forward, towering over the sniveling governor. "Listen closely, because I won't repeat myself. You may not think you need us, but make no mistake. Without our protection, your entire colony will be wiped out, and not just by pirates or raiders. There's something else out there, something worse, and it's coming for you. So you can either shut up and let us do our job, or you can die along with everyone else on this miserable rock. Your choice." The lieutenant commander turned his back on Novak, knowing the prideful fool would never admit the truth. But Tucker had a mission, and he'd be damned if he let a few ungrateful aliens stop him from completing it. "Ripper Mikey with me," he barked. "We've got work to do. The fate of this colony and maybe the whole damn galaxy rests on our shoulders, and I'll be damned if I let humanity down." With that, Tucker and his trusted soldiers marched out of the governor's palace, ready to face whatever horrors lurked in the shadows of Zephyrus Prime. The Akamarians might not appreciate the small human army in their midst, but soon enough they'd be thanking their lucky stars that human courage stood between them and total annihilation. As Tucker and his team ventured deeper into the dark underbelly of the Akamarian colony, a sinking feeling settled in their guts. The Crixian raiders, once thought to be the primary threat, now seemed like a mere distraction from a far more insidious presence. Pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The strange energy readings, the unexplained disappearances, the governor's erratic behavior. It all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple raider incursion. Their investigations led them to a chilling discovery. An ancient parasitic alien species known as the Orcs had been secretly infiltrating the colony for months. These shape-shifting creatures, hive-minded and relentless, had been replacing key members of the Akamarian leadership one by one, including Governor Novak himself. Tucker's blood ran cold as he realized the true nature of the Vorax's plan. The energy readings and disappearances were the result of the parasites' attempts to create a stable wormhole, a gateway that would allow them to bring their entire fleet to Zephyrus Prime. From there, they would use the planet as a staging ground for a galactic conquest of unimaginable scale. Time was running out. Tucker and his team raced against the clock to gather evidence of the Vorax's presence, desperate to present their findings to the remaining Akamarian leaders before it was too late. But their efforts did not go unnoticed. Soon they found themselves hunted by the Vorax-controlled Akamarian security forces, led by the creature wearing Governor Novak's face. In a desperate gambit to buy time, Tucker sent O'Neill and Chen to sabotage the Vorax's wormhole generator, while he confronted the Vorax Novak in a tense standoff. The creature's eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence as it circled the lieutenant commander, taunting him with the extent of the Vorax's infiltration. Tucker stood his ground, his voice unwavering as he exposed the Vorax Novak's true nature in front of a group of shocked Akamarian officials. But even as the truth came to light, the creature let slip a chilling revelation. The Vorax had already infiltrated the highest levels of the Galactic Defense Force itself, and Tucker's own commanding officer, Admiral Zachary Sumner, may be one of them. The implications of this revelation hung heavy in the air as Tucker and the Akamarian officials exchanged glances of growing horror. If the Voraks had indeed infiltrated the GDF, then no one was safe. The fate of not just Zephyrus Prime, but the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Tucker's mind raced as the implications of the Voraks' infiltration sank in. The GDF, once a beacon of hope and security for the galaxy, had been compromised at its highest levels. He clenched his fists, knowing that he and his team were now the only ones standing between the Voraks and total galactic domination. Gathering his soldiers and a handful of loyal Akamarian troops, led by Captain Zoran Krell, who had long suspected Governor Novak's odd behavior, Tucker made a daring escape from Zephyrus Prime aboard a stolen Akamarian shuttle. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere, Tucker's thoughts turned to his old friend and former GDF intelligence officer, Liam Hawkins. Hawkins had been investigating whispers of a secret Voraks infiltration for years, and Tucker knew he was their best chance at uncovering the truth. He hailed Hawkins on a secure channel, his heart pounding as the connection crackled to life. "Liam, it's Tucker. We've got a situation here." Hawkins' face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. "I know, Keith. I've been tracking the Voraks' movements for months now. They're not just on Zephyrus Prime, they're everywhere." Tucker leaned forward, his voice urgent. "What have you found?" The Voraks have been pulling the strings behind the scenes for decades, orchestrating conflicts and destabilizing governments across the galaxy. They've been weakening us, preparing for a full-scale invasion. A chill ran down Tucker's spine. Where are they based? "My intel suggests their main base of operations is located on an uncharted planet in the Omega Centauri cluster. It's remote, off the grid, the perfect place to hide." Tucker nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then that's where we're heading. Send me the coordinates." As the shuttle charted a course for the Omega Centauri cluster, Tucker briefed his team on the mission ahead. They knew the risks, but they also knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The journey was treacherous, forcing them to navigate through dense asteroid fields and evade Voraks-controlled GDF patrols. As they neared their destination, a distress signal pinged on their sensors, a Voraks prison ship, adrift in the void. Tucker's gut told him to investigate, and what they found aboard the ship shook them to their core. Hundreds of humans and Akamarians, all of whom had been replaced by Voraks infiltrators, were being held captive in cramped, filthy cells. Among them, to Tucker's shock, was Admiral Sumner himself. Sumner's face was gaunt, his eyes haunted as Tucker helped him to his feet. "Keith, thank God, I thought I was done for." "What happened, Admiral?" Tucker asked, his voice low. "They took me months ago, replaced me with one of their own. I've been here ever since, watching as they brought in more and more prisoners." Tucker's mind raced with the implications. "Do you know anything about their weaknesses, their plans?" Sumner nodded, his expression hardening. "I've overheard things, pieced together what I could. Their central hive mind is on the surface of the planet, in a heavily fortified compound. If you can destroy it, you might have a chance at stopping them." Tucker clasped Sumner's shoulder, his eyes blazing with determination. "We'll get you out of here, Admiral, all of you, and then we'll make sure the Voraks pay for what they've done." As they freed the prisoners and set course for the planet's surface, Tucker knew that the hardest part of their mission was still ahead. But with his team by his side and the fate of the galaxy in their hands, he was ready to face whatever horrors the Voraks had in store. As the stolen Akamarian shuttle descended through the turbulent atmosphere of the uncharted planet, Tucker gripped the controls tightly, his eyes fixed on the twisted, nightmarish landscape below. Jagged spires of obsidian rock jutted from the ground, intertwined with pulsating organic structures that seemed to throb with a sickly, otherworldly light. The air was thick with a noxious, sulphurous stench that seeped into the shuttle's cabin, making the human soldiers gag and choke. "Holy shit," Sergeant O'Neill muttered, his face pale as he stared out the viewport. "What the hell is this place?" Tucker shook his head, his jaw set in a grim line. The heart of the Vorac's infestation. Their central hive mind is down there somewhere, and we need to find it and destroy it before it's too late. As the shuttle touched down on a rocky outcropping, the team geared up, checking their weapons and equipment with a sense of grim determination. Captain Krell and his Akamarian soldiers looked uneasy, their eyes darting nervously at the twisted landscape around them. "Stay close and stay alert," Tucker ordered as they disembarked. "We don't know what kind of horrors the Vorac's have waiting for us." The team moved cautiously through the eerie, pulsating terrain, their boots crunching on the obsidian gravel beneath their feet. Strange, chittering noises echoed from the shadows, and the air seemed to hum with an unseen energy that made their skin crawl. Suddenly, a piercing shriek rent the air, and a swarm of Vorac's drones burst from the twisted spires, their insectoid bodies bristling with razor-sharp claws and dripping with a viscous black ichor. Tucker and his team opened fire, their blasters tearing through the chitinous hide of the drones, but for every one they killed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "Fall back!" Tucker shouted, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "We need to find cover!" The team retreated, fighting a desperate rearguard action as they sought shelter in a nearby cave. But as they pushed deeper into the darkness, they found themselves in a chamber of horrors beyond their wildest nightmares. Row upon row of glass tanks lined the walls, each one filled with a pulsating, gelatinous mass that seemed to writhe and twist with a life of its own, and floating within each tank, suspended in the viscous fluid, were the bodies of captured humans and Akamarians, their faces contorted in silent screams of agony. "Dear God," Private Mikey whispered, his voice trembling with horror, "what are they doing to them?" Tucker stepped closer to one of the tanks, his eyes widening in dawning realization. "They're using them as incubators, breeding a new strain of Vorac's infiltrators." As he spoke, one of the tanks shattered and a figure stumbled out, its body racked with convulsions. Tucker's heart sank as he recognized the face of Private Chen, his features twisted and distorted by the Vorac's infection that coursed through his veins. Chen let out an inhuman shriek, his eyes blazing with a feral predatory hunger, as he lunged at his former comrades. Tucker raised his blaster, his finger hovering over the trigger, but he hesitated, unable to bring himself to fire on his own man. "Chen, stand down!" he barked, his voice cracking with emotion. "That's an order!" But Chen was beyond reason, his mind consumed by the Vorac's hive mind. He charged forward, his claws slashing at Tucker's face, and the lieutenant commander had no choice but to pull the trigger. The blast caught Chen square in the chest, and he crumpled to the ground, his body twitching and convulsing as the life drained from his eyes. Tucker knelt beside him, his heart heavy with grief and regret. "I'm sorry, Chen," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of his own ragged breathing. "I'm so sorry." But there was no time to mourn. The team had to keep moving, had to find the central hive mind before it was too late. They pushed deeper into the twisted labyrinth of the Vorac's lair, their blasters at the ready, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. And then, as they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with a nightmare made flesh. The Vorac's queen towered over them, her massive, grotesque body pulsating with a sickly, bioluminescent glow. Her razor-sharp claws flexed and twitched, and her eyes, twin pools of swirling, hypnotic energy, fixed on Tucker with a malevolent intelligence. "Lieutenant Commander Keith Tucker," she purred, her voice a sibilant hiss that seemed to echo inside his skull. "I've been watching you since you first set foot on Zephyrus Prime. You have fought bravely, but your struggle is futile. Join us, and I will grant you power beyond your wildest dreams. Immortality, dominion over the galaxy, all of it can be yours." Tucker felt a shiver run down his spine, and for a moment he was tempted. The promise of power, of immortality, was seductive, alluring, but then he thought of his fallen comrades, of the countless lives the Vorac's had destroyed, and his resolve hardened. "Go to hell," he snarled, raising his blaster and firing point-blank at the Queen's head. The blast caught her square between the eyes, and she let out a shriek of rage and pain. her massive body convulsing and thrashing. Tucker and his team opened fire, pouring every ounce of firepower they had into the Queen's writhing form. The battle was fierce and desperate, a whirlwind of claws and blaster fire, of screams and explosions. Tucker felt a searing pain in his side as one of the Queen's claws found its mark, but he gritted his teeth and kept fighting, his blaster spitting death and destruction. And then, with a final convulsive shudder, the Queen collapsed, her massive body crashing to the ground in a tangle of twitching limbs and oozing ichor. Tucker staggered forward, his vision blurring, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He placed a charge on the Queen's head, his fingers trembling as he set the timer. "This ends now," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the countdown. The team barely made it out of the lair before the charges detonated, sending a cascade of destruction rippling through the Vorax network. Tucker watched as the twisted spires crumbled and collapsed, as the pulsating organic structures withered and died. But even as the Vorax threat was eliminated, Tucker knew that the scars of this battle would linger. The horrors he had witnessed, the losses he had suffered, would stay with him forever. And as he looked out over the ruined landscape of the uncharted planet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that there were still greater threats waiting in the shadows of the galaxy. Tucker and his team raced through the collapsing tunnels of the Vorax lair, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the planet began to tear itself apart. Sergeant O'Neill and Captain Krell flanked Tucker, their faces grim and determined as they dodged falling debris and leaped over widening chasms. "Move, move, move," Tucker shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening roar of the planet's death throes. They burst out into the open air, the acrid stench of sulfur and burning flesh assaulting their nostrils. The stolen Acamarian shuttle waited for them, its engines already humming with power. They scrambled aboard, slamming the hatch shut behind them as the first waves of molten fire began to consume the planet's surface. Tucker threw himself into the pilot's seat, his fingers flying over the controls as he guided the shuttle up and away from the doomed world. They broke through the atmosphere, the shuttle shuddering and groaning under the strain, and emerged into the cold emptiness of space. From their vantage point in orbit, they watched as the Vorax structures crumbled and collapsed, the pulsating organic towers and hive-like formations consumed by the planet's fiery death throes. It was a sight both terrible and beautiful, a testament to the destructive power of the Vorax and the indomitable will of the human spirit. As they set course for Zephyrus Prime, a message pinged on the shuttle's comm system. It was from Liam Hawkins, his face haggard but triumphant. "Tucker, you did it," he said, his voice crackling with static. "The Vorax infiltrators throughout the galaxy are withering and dying, their connection to the hive mind severed. The GDF is already beginning a galaxy-wide purge of the remaining infiltrators." Tucker let out a long, shuddering breath, the weight of the past few days finally catching up with him. "What about Zephyrus Prime?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Hawkins' face fell, his expression grim. "The colony lies in ruins, its population decimated by the Vorax's machinations. But the survivors are already beginning to rebuild, and they're hailing you and your team as heroes." Tucker nodded, his jaw tight with emotion. It was a bittersweet victory, one that had come at a terrible cost. As they approached Zephyrus Prime, he could see the extent of the damage even from orbit. The once gleaming spires of the Acamarian city lay in ruins, the streets choked with rubble and the bodies of the fallen. They touched down on the outskirts of the city, the shuttle kicking up clouds of dust and ash as it settled onto the scorched earth. Tucker and his team disembarked, their faces grim as they surveyed the destruction. A small group of Acamarian survivors approached them, their faces haggard, and their eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. At their head was Captain Zoran Krell, his once pristine uniform torn and stained with blood. "Lieutenant Commander Tucker," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "on behalf of the Acamarian people, I thank you and your team for your bravery and sacrifice. Without you, our colony would have been lost." Tucker shook Krell's hand, his grip firm and resolute. We did what we had to do, Captain. But the real heroes are those who gave their lives to stop the Orcs. As he spoke, a soldier approached, his face ashen and his eyes downcast. "Sir," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we found Private Chen's body. It's bad, sir." Tucker felt a cold knot of dread settle in his stomach, but he forced himself to nod. "Take me to him." They found Chen's body in a shallow crater on the outskirts of the city, his once human form twisted and distorted by the Vorax's experiments. Tucker knelt beside him, his eyes stinging with unshed tears as he gazed upon the face of his fallen comrade. "He was a good soldier," Sergeant O'Neill said, his voice rough with emotion. "He deserved better than this." Tucker nodded, his jaw tight with grief and anger. "We'll make sure he gets a proper burial, and we'll make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain." They buried Chen on a hilltop overlooking the ruined city, his grave marked with a simple stone cairn. Tucker and his team stood around the grave, their heads bowed in silent tribute to their fallen comrade. As the sun began to set over the horizon, Tucker turned to his team, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "The Vorax may be defeated, but we know there are other threats out there, waiting in the darkness of space. We have to be ready to face them, no matter the cost." O'Neill and Krell nodded, their faces set with the same grim resolve. They knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, that they would face challenges and horrors beyond their wildest imaginings. But as they boarded their ship and set off into the unknown, Tucker felt a sense of purpose and clarity that he had never known before. The bonds between him and his team had been forged in the crucible of war, their resolve unshakable in the face of the horrors that awaited them. And as he looked out at the stars, Tucker knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, united in their determination to protect humanity from the dangers that lurked in the depths of space. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.